Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Season 7, Episode 10, overall 340 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210, or email them at info@barrycullen.com. Live with CDP Sports Talk is on weeknights from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM in Metro Atlanta, the home of Southern Talk and Sports. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well on this Thursday, November 30th, 2023. And it's just hard to believe November's almost finished and tomorrow's December 1st. But I'm looking forward to my guest today. This is his first time on my show, and his name is Adam Battocchi. I hope I didn't butcher his name. I apologize. He is a TV personality for Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus, covering the NFL's Washington Commanders. I almost said Redskins, but Washington Commanders. And he also did some fantasy football segments during the regular season and picks of the week in the playoffs from 2010 to the present. And I'm going to bring on Adam right now, and we're going to talk some Washington Commanders and some National Football League as well. Good afternoon, Adam. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Chris?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on my show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So how things in you're out of Virginia?
I am. I'm out of Reston, Virginia. So the Commanders are the team out in this area, and the Ravens aren't too far up north.
How far is FedEx Field from where your location is?
It's roughly an hour.
Hour?
It varies, with traffic. It can be as short as, if you take the metro, it's much quicker, but by car, I'd say it's roughly an hour.
Wow. I got to ask you about this. I know I grew up with RFK Stadium, and is there any possibility the Commanders could leave FedEx Field and move back into Washington? And I've heard rumors about the old RFK Stadium site.
Well, it has been talked about, Chris, but I will say this. It then gets into who's going to pay for it, taxpayers or owners. If taxpayers are going to pay it, then the local government's going to have their say as to how that's going to be done, everything from where it's going to be to et cetera. It has to be approved. And so you have to get those things figured out.
What's your overall take on FedEx Stadium Field?
Well, everything I've been told, everything I've seen, it needs upgrades. The Harris Group, as I understand it, has put in their share of money to upgrade it, at least for the time being. So that's made, from what I understand, the experience better. But they definitely need a new stadium. The stadium goes back to 1997. It's one of the older stadiums in the NFL. Therefore, you need to have it upgraded, and then eventually they need a new place to play.
And I know the Buffalo Bills, they've played in the same stadium since 1973. They've got a new stadium that's going to be built across the street from the current one that's going to open up in 2026 as well. And that was long overdue for the Buffalo Bills and their supporters as well.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I remember when they were Rich Stadium, when you had the years of Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and Bruce Smith.
Yeah.
And those were the years where the Buffalo Bills were the team from the AFC going to the Super Bowl.
I don't think you'll ever see that again. I know the Patriots went 3 years in a row, but to go 4 years in a row, I know they lost all 4 times, but that's still a special 4-year run.
It really is. You don't see it anymore. That shows you how special it is. As a matter of fact, Frank Reich was on those Bills teams. Just got fired by the Carolina Panthers, and so he was on those clubs.
great. I thought he was a great backup quarterback, and I think he's still a good offensive coordinator. And I'm hoping the Eagles selfishly can bring him back in for the rest of this year as well. I don't think he got a fair shake in Carolina, in my opinion.
Oh,
After
I
11
agree with you.
years.
I'm sorry. I agree with you, Chris. David Tepper has become, to me, the worst owner in NFL history. Yes, that includes Dan Snyder, and I'll tell you why. When you hire a coach, if you don't give him the full season, that's on you, not anybody else. And I hear all this stuff about the Snyder scandal and what have you. The fact of the matter is, he's the one who got caught. We don't know how clean all the rest are. And the only way to find out is to hire private investigators. Nobody's going to be able to do that. So we can't naively believe that all of them will come back cleaner if you were to do that, if that were to happen. With that in mind, I'm going to go based on what I've seen on the field. What I've seen on the field is David Tepper has had losing seasons every year he's been an owner. And what I've also seen is he actually fired Ron Rivera before the season ended after a loss to the Washington team. And he doesn't give you a chance to win. So you have to ask yourself, if you're a candidate for that team, why would I consider taking that job when the owner's been there since 2018 and they've had nothing but losing seasons? It's completely dysfunctional. He doesn't give you time. He doesn't give you a chance to win. And he just does what he wants. He can do that, but what's going to happen eventually is the Panther fans are going to leave the way they did Washington at FedEx Field.
You covered the National Football League for a long time, Adam. I got to ask you this straight up. When you hire a head coach, how many years do you figure they need to turn the program around? At least 3 or 4 years?
I would say usually by the third year. Historically speaking, if you remember, Mike Shanahan was here. Year one, this team went 6-10. Dan Snyder said he still believed in him. He told Dave Feldman that in an interview. And then in year two, he still stuck with him. And Shanahan said at that time, he's been very supportive. Year three, they started 3-6. And they then won 7 straight games and got into the playoffs, won the division. So you see that by the third year, the corner was turned. Now, Robert Griffin III was figured out. He ran a college-style offense. Teams picked up on that scheme, on those schemes, and he couldn't adjust. Therefore, he couldn't play quarterback in the NFL. Now, he has a long career ahead of him in TV. He's phenomenal at ESPN, and he should stay there forever if I had my vote on that. But as a quarterback, he was figured out. The system was gone. He couldn't figure out how to do better, and it cost him his career as a starter in the NFL. You see that typically when teams by the third year, you see teams turn it around. Tony Dungy got to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1996. Year one, they went 6-10. Year two, they went 10-6. Year three, they went 8-8. But usually, I think it's, for me, a 3-year plan is the ideal scenario for each team.
I think the Eagles got a little lucky with Nick Sirianni, because I know when he took over, his first year they were 9-8 and squeaked in the playoffs, and then last year they went 14-3, and then this year 10-1. It's just been amazing as well. Hey, I got to ask you this too, Adam. What were your thoughts on Kyle Shanahan's time in Washington as well?
Well, I think he did some things well, but I think he had problems with ownership. I mean, I think a lot of people have had problems with ownership, but there were some things they did wrong. I don't know about the whole RG3 thing. Should he have played? I think that was a problem for them. It was established when Jay Gruden was here that Kirk Cousins was the better of the two quarterbacks. So maybe maybe Griffin was forced upon him. That's a possibility. But if not, that means to me, Kirk Cousins should have been the starter from the get-go. And had that happened, Kyle probably gets this head coaching job here. And, maybe Mike is never fired. He just retires and becomes this, his son takes over for the Commanders. But I think that was his biggest downfall here. Now, another thing, too, is he might not have been ready here in Washington. If you remember, after he left here, he went to other teams. He went to the Browns. He then went to Atlanta, where they got to the Super Bowl, and that's when he got the head coaching job with San Francisco. And like I said before, year one, they were 6-10. Year 2, they were 4-12. Year 3, they were, so by the third year, Kyle got them to the Super Bowl, and they've been a competitive team ever since. But, I think the 49ers, it's funny you mentioned Kyle Shanahan and his situation. When you look at the Commanders and their football team and the rest of their schedule, everybody's written them off. And I get that. And I get that, they don't put much confidence in people with their play. But the season's not over. And some of those teams are hanging by a thread. One of those teams, to me, is the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan. What I have noticed is they depend on a 35-year-old, 14-year veteran. His name is Trent Williams. The minute he went down and missed those games, they went on a 3-game losing streak, and Brock Purdy got exposed as the 7th-round draft pick that he is. If they came to Washington and Williams didn't play, are you of the opinion the Commanders' defensive line, without the other guys they had, with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, couldn't get in the face of Brock Purdy, cause him to turn the ball over, and make it easy for Washington to potentially steal an upset win? I think that's certainly a possibility. And so for that reason, I like Kyle. I think he's done a great job. But when you're depending on a left tackle who's had an injury history and is a 14-year veteran at 35 to be the difference between making the playoffs and winning a Super Bowl and not making it to the playoffs at all, that's a very risky set of circumstances.
Well, one thing too, the Eagles played without Lane Johnson this weekend, and they did beat Buffalo without him. But their record without Lane Johnson was under 500. So I'm hoping he can play against San Francisco, because Lane Johnson's one of the better tackles in the game, and he adds so much to that Eagles offensive line as well.
Right. I mean, the 49ers, when they were on that losing streak, they lost to, if Cleveland. I'm not mistaken, they lost to the Browns, they lost to the Vikings. And who was the third team they lost to?
Browns, Vikings, yes. I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
It escapes me. Just 1 second, I'll find out for you.
Yeah,
they lost to 3 teams that they otherwise probably would have beaten handily if number 71 had been available. But he wasn't. And, it was the Browns, the Vikings, and the Bengals.
So, I forgot about that. Cincinnati,
okay,
yeah.
But also, one of those games was at home to Cincinnati. And so the idea that right now on paper, you say the 49ers should come into FedEx Field and annihilate the Commanders. But if you lose your left tackle, Trent Williams, and Brock Purdy gets exposed, you can bet Washington's defensive tackles, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, can get in his face, force him to turn the ball over, and that offense can turn those turnovers into points, and beat the 49ers here at FedEx Field. They can. So I just think that's a very risky thing to have be what is holding the team together. And that's what the 49ers have, to me, based on what I've seen so far this year.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do now is I'm going to get into about the Commanders, and then we'll talk a little bit at the end towards the Eagles, 49ers, and some NFL news, if that's okay, Adam.
Sounds good.
All right. First question I wanted to ask you: overall thoughts on the 2023 Washington Commanders so far after 12 games?
Their defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, has a history of making teams' defenses elite right away. However, it is now year 4 since they hired him, and he was fired after the defense hit rock bottom. What's more, the 2 defensive ends were traded for draft choices. And that, to me, has been the biggest disappointment of this football team, because that was considered the strength of this football team coming into the year. Each year since he's been here, since Del Rio's been here, we knew coming in that they couldn't keep both Montez Sweat and Chase Young in all likelihood. One of them was going to have to go. Well, instead, you've gotten rid of both of them for draft choices. And I just think that was a disaster. And I think also, as far as Eric Bieniemy is concerned, he's improved their offense. But you see a big difference between Patrick Mahomes and Sam Howell. And the Commanders' record is a reflection of such things. And so my take on that is Sam Howell is a good quarterback. He has upside. I think he has every bit as much potential as a Kirk Cousins does. But to me, Kirk Cousins is a good NFL starter and not more than that. Why? Because every time the stakes are highest, he loses games that a very good or great quarterback would win. And I think Sam Howell has that kind of upside. He's good, but not very good or great. And so the Commanders' season, to me, it's been a disappointment. And unless this team finishes by running the table, winning the rest of their games, which is conceivable but not likely, that would probably get them into the playoffs. Doing so at 9-8 because of how weak the NFC is per se. And then after that, conceivably, if you won a playoff game, who are we kidding? You'd have to bring Rivera back under those circumstances, right? So, but having said that, that scenario is very unlikely. And I think wholesale changes are coming in 2024.
What was the reaction in Washington with the media and the fans after Jack Darrell being let go after their Thanksgiving Day loss to Dallas?
I can't say people were surprised. When you lose as badly as they did in a must-win game, and you can't produce, then now for a while their defense was pretty good in that game, but eventually, they eventually crumbled. You only get so many chances before somebody eventually gives in. Well, that's also what costs people jobs. And, people weren't surprised. Something had to be done. I mean, you're one of the one of the worst defenses in the league. And, Ron Rivera's job's on the line. And who are we kidding? When a coach's job's on the line, he or she is going to do what's absolutely necessary for them to get the best results they need. And that's why Jack Del Rio was let go.
The Commanders are 29th out of 32 teams, and Buffalo, they let their offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey go too, because they're feeling the pressure as well from their fans and their media base as well. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Adam, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. Obviously, Allen's got all this talent, but everybody forgets to mention with quarterbacks, there's an intangible that's just as important as the other stats, and that's the ability to win games in the clutch. And I wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, you and I were tweeting as that game between the Eagles and the Bills was getting into the late stages of it. And as an Eagles fan, you watched it, and you saw Jalen Hurts come through with that touchdown at the end to seal the victory. Well, guess what? That's also what makes and breaks quarterbacks when ranking them in the NFL. And at this point, because Jalen Hurts has been to a Super Bowl and Josh Allen has not, to me, Hurts has to be ranked ahead of him. Simple as that. Every year the Bills window, people are saying it's closing. Well, how many chances do you get before you have to produce? Well, Jalen Hurts has done it. His team has the best record in the NFL. They lost the turnover margin by a lot, yet they still found a way to come out with a win. That was shocking. And so Jalen Hurts, to me, has been the MVP of the NFL. If I had a vote, and I don't, that would be my pick. He would get my vote just because his team is the best in the NFL record-wise. Every time he needs to come through in the clutch, he does. What more can be asked of somebody?
And that's what I try to tell other fans too. It's not just yards passing and touchdowns, interceptions. Is the bottom line is wins and to come through in the clutch. And look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady didn't always have the greatest stats in a game, but at the end of the day, Tom Brady, obviously the greatest of all time, always knew how to win games at the end.
That's right. And
I'm not comparing Hurts to Brady yet.
No,
it's
but
way too early.
Your point is right on the money, Chris, because when Tom Brady was given difficult circumstances. 9 times out of 10, he came through. The times he didn't were when he played the Eagles and the Giants, the Colts, and the Broncos. Why are those teams all notable? Because there was only one way to beat Brady. That was to get to him with a dominant defensive line without blitzing. If you didn't have that when playing the Patriots or Tom Brady, you were going to lose. And guess what? He did that to teams routinely throughout his career.
Absolutely. And the Eagles recently just released one of the guys that had the big sack of Brady in that Super Bowl, Derek Burnett, who I think he just signed with Arizona, I believe, the Cardinals.
Derek Burnett is he was talented coming out of college. Yeah, and actually the Cardinals just released Zach Ertz, so the former Eagles tight end.
I'm actually hoping the Eagles reunite with Zach Ertz, because Dallas Goedert is I'm not sure when he's coming back, but Zach Ertz is a Philadelphia fan favorite, and I would like to see him finish his career with the Eagles, but we'll see.
He might return.
We'll see, because I think he's still a decent tight end, and Dallas Goedert. Another thing too, people don't realize how good he is. He might not be the best tight end in the National Football League, but he's a great blocking tight end, and he can go out there and catch the ball, and he's a good route router. Yeah.
I have NFL Sunday Ticket on DirecTV, so I see this on a routine, regular basis. He has always been very underrated, and still is today.
Can I get your thoughts, Adam, on the Commanders trading Montez Sweat to Chicago and Chase Young to the Niners before the NFL trade deadline? Did you see that happening?
I did. Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you, Chris. Coming into the year, those two players were free agents after the season. They knew they couldn't keep both of them. Okay? They were too expensive. And when you look at that situation, coming into the year, my thinking was this is going to be one of the best defenses in football, and you're not going to be able to keep your defensive line that's so elite together. Having said that, this team wasn't and isn't an elite defense. And when you're not winning, and when your defense is not elite, but you have those two players who are upcoming free agents, you have to trade them and get what you can for them before they leave. That's what they did. And, Sweat has since played well at times for the Bears. It remains to be seen what Chase Young ends up doing in San Francisco. I mean, yeah, he got a sack or whatever, but he hasn't been, I don't think, what people anticipated when he was drafted second overall in 2020. He hasn't been the Nick Bosa dominant defensive end that the 49ers had. That was basically my hope, and I think some other people's hopes when they selected him 3 years ago. But that hasn't happened. And so they had to get what they could for them both and not let them leave for nothing, and that's what they did.
How are the Commanders' salary cap implications going into next year? Do you know that as of now?
Well, that's one of the things they're thinking about is they're going to have cap room. So they're going to be able to start over. Now the question becomes, who's going to make those decisions? When Josh Harris buys this team from Dan Snyder, he's a new owner. Okay. That means that everybody that's here, you don't know if you're going to be back. And unless this, like I said before, unless this team runs the table and gets to the playoffs, wholesale changes are coming. Therefore, new guys are going to come in and make decisions based on what they think. And at this point, I think you'll see a team, depending on what team they select the staff from, meaning the new GM, who that person becomes. I've heard the 49ers have a guy that works for them. I've heard his name mentioned. If he comes in, chances are he's going to mold the team in something along the lines of where he came from or what he'd be comfortable with. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so unless this team runs the table, and it's conceivable but not likely, wholesale changes are coming. And when that happens with new ownership, with a new staff, it's very difficult to say who's going to stick around and who isn't. But if I had to guess, I would say a guy like Terry McLaurin is likely going to return. I think of Daron Payne is likely to return, probably Jonathan Allen. Allen went to high school in this area. He has a home here. He's basically been raised here for all intents and purposes. Been here the majority of his life. So he's homegrown. I could see him staying. But there will be changes. And what that involves at this point is still unknown. Unless, like I said, this team makes the playoffs and does advances in the postseason.
How much damage did Dan Snyder do to this franchise and the fan base?
He did a tremendous amount of damage. But the reality is that, and I said this to somebody, this team missed the playoffs by one game in 1997. If they had been the worst team in football, instead of missing the playoffs by one game in 1997, they would have been in a position to select a quarterback from Tennessee named Peyton Manning. And in the event that happened, Norv Turner would have still been here in Snyder's first year, which would have been his second year with Peyton Manning. They make the playoffs. They do some damage. You see him do well. Manning has a long run with Norv Turner. Not only is Dan Snyder probably still this team's owner, but also there's no name change, if you ask me. Why is that? Because winning cures everything. I mean, who are we kidding? That's the nature of the business. So but the bottom line being, Chris, because there's been losing, the damage has been enhanced due to losing. And let's be honest about one thing. I have followed this team closely since the summer of 1991. That's more than 30 years. 1991 was the last time and the only time this team has won more than 10 games in a season since I followed them. Which means that the losing started long before Dan Snyder arrived. It goes back to 1993. Snyder got here in 99. From 1993 to 1998, this team averaged 6 wins a year and did not make the playoffs at all. That's before Snyder, which means that's very significant because when Snyder was here, there was losing. But the idea that a new ownership is going to guarantee that you start winning is out of touch with reality. And, he did a tremendous amount of damage. The fans eventually left, which caused him to sell. But you have to win. It's the only way to cure everything. I mean, look what's happened in New England now that Brady has left. Belichick isn't any different than he was with the Browns.
No, I agree.
And by the way, Bob Kraft is not happy. He's talking about making changes. He's talking about doing this and that. Winning is the only way to cure everything. And yes, Dan Snyder did a lot of damage. I get that. I get that, he made some mistakes. But the reality is the only way to really make people in sports happy is to win. And, Josh Harris, the fan support he has will only last for a while before what happened to Dan Snyder essentially happens to him, unless they start winning.
How many years would you say the fans will be willing to give Josh Harris and his ownership group to turn things around in Washington?
That's hard to say. My guess would be, I'm going to say it depends on how you go about getting it done. If you say, all right, and I know his name's been thrown out there, people have said, a friend of mine keeps telling me there's no chance this happens. But let's say this team were able to call Jim Harbaugh and persuade him to come to Washington. Well, from what I've seen from Jim Harbaugh, he's never had a losing season in the NFL.
No, I don't recall.
And A guy like him could instantly make this team competitive immediately, and you start winning. If you do that, then Josh Harris has a lifeline that probably lasts at least 5-6 years, because you're winning right away. You're competitive right away. You're not holding on to the past. And this team hasn't seen winning like Jim Harbaugh has done since 1991. So that kind of winning would have been hitting a home run and the ball not coming down for, 5 years. But that's the kind of home run you got to hit if this team is going to be getting the kind of chance that they would ideally like to see. Short of that, I can't see this team getting more than, say, 3 to 4 years at most before they say this. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So, yes, it was great that they made an ownership change. And yes, the fans have come this year. But you have to win, or they'll be back to ground zero in the near future.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Adam, with this question. What's your gut feeling on Ron Rivera and this coaching staff coming back next year? Or you just want to wait and see what happens in these final 5 regular season games?
I can already tell you. They have to make the playoffs. That means they have to run the table the rest of the way. Doing so will almost certainly get you in as the 7th and final wild card, just because of how weak the NFC is. We have seen the Minnesota Vikings lose the last 2 weeks. They've lost to Denver, but they've also lost at home to the Chicago Bears. You get into the playoffs, or there's a coaching change. It's as simple as that. You probably even have to win a playoff game to guarantee he comes back. That's what happens when you're here 4 years and they haven't had a winning season. Running the table gets you to 9-8. That's a winning season. Probably gets you into the playoffs. If you then win a playoff game, that enhances Sam Howell's development. That makes this a successful season just because you've done that and you've made this team a success. Anything other than that, and he's probably gone.
Not an easy schedule the last 5 games. Obviously, Miami coming up. They're a very good football club. The Rams are beatable. The Jets are beatable. Obviously, they have a really horrific offense. And then you got the San Francisco 49ers and Dallas at FedEx Field to end up the season.
Yeah, the last game of the year, that's the game where I would say of those other games, those teams are hanging by a thread. That's why I say the 49ers are hanging by the thread that is Trent Williams, which means if he goes down, you can win that game. The Dolphins are hanging by the thread that is Tua. Therefore, if he gets injured, do you trust Mike White, their quarterback, to come into FedEx Field and win? Probably not, with a team fighting for its life. The Rams are unknown. You can still win that game. The Jets are a bad football team. You can win that game. These are still winnable games. But guess what? And they can win them, but I don't see that happening on paper. Now, Tyreek Hill is questionable for Sunday against the Commanders. If he does not play, that's more winnable than it would be otherwise. And, it's a home game. You're a desperate team. They could win. But if they don't win on Sunday, the odds of everybody getting fired are probably 100%. That's because you can't get into the playoffs otherwise. And my gut feeling is we're going to see changes. Unless this team gets into the playoffs and actually wins a postseason game, everybody's going to get fired. That's my take. Okay.
And this leads to my next question, Adam. Who are some Washington Commander players who have stood out this season? And who are some of the players that have had kind of sort of disappointing seasons in 2023?
Who stood out? I think Brian Robinson has stood out. Developing as a very underrated pass catcher. His chemistry with Sam Howell, his ability to score, that has stood out. And as a result, he has stood out. Who's disappointed? Well, he's a rookie, but I think they expected more out of Emmanuel Forbes. Some of those games that he's missed those assignments where he's made those mistakes, that's been a disappointment. I think to some degree, Jahan Dotson has disappointed just because I don't think I'm alone when I say they expected him to become a star after such a great rookie season, meaning that he was going to develop tremendous chemistry with Sam Howell. They were going to suddenly, he was going to light up the league in terms of scoring touchdowns, etc. And that hasn't happened. So, those are players that have not lived up to the expectations that I had. And I think Deron Payne has still stood out. He's the second guy that I think has stood out. He's still elite. He's still playing at an elite level. That would be my take.
I know the Eagles won both games against Commanders, but the Commanders gave the Eagles everything they could handle in both of those meetings this year. And that's why I don't understand how they can play the Eagles so competitively, but they just got blown out in Dallas.
That's a great question. I think to some degree, it's how you match up with certain teams.
Good point.
I think when you have different teams that you play, some teams give you problems depending on the style of play, the kind of team they are. It's also how quickly you get off to, how fast a start you get off to. When you get off to a great start, it's easier than if you don't. Take the Bears game on Thursday Night Football. You may have seen that one. The Bears were a winless team. On paper, the Commanders should have annihilated them and beaten them. They lost by 20.
That shocked me.
The Bears came ready to play, and the Commanders didn't. Well, that happens in sports. But again,
matchups.
That's happened again to this team that on paper they should win. That's happened every year since 1992. They've had at least 2 games they were supposed to win on paper that they lost. That's one of them. And for this year. And, when you go back and look at that, the consistency is not there. But I think part of it is the human nature side of you're fired up to beat the best team in football, so you get your best game. You naturally play your best game you can. When you're not thinking about the Chicago Bears as a winless team in that way, like you would the Eagles. Or if you take, last year they knocked the Eagles off when they had that perfect season at stake. Remember?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They did. But
that was a great win.
They also lost a game to the Browns that they were picked to win with the season on the line. And so the consistency, that's why you're 8-1 instead of 10-7. That's why you're 9-7 instead of 11-5. Beating teams you're supposed to win is something this team has not done every week, all the time, all year long since 1991. And that, to me, is something you have to fix, or it doesn't matter who the coach is, you're going to keep losing.
Well, to me, the NFC East is a much stronger division when Washington is strong, and same with the Giants right now. Out of those 2 franchises right now, Washington and the Giants, which franchise can turn it around a lot quicker?
Well, the Giants season isn't over. So let's say, for example, they had a very, very strong finish. Keep in mind, that team was 9-7-1 last year and won a playoff game with its current staff, with its current quarterback, with its current coaching staff. And I'm talking about Daniel Jones and I'm talking about Brian Daboll. So you ask me, you got a coach who's already gotten you to the playoffs and won a playoff game. You had a very slow start. You had injuries, but you came on at the end of the year to finish strong. You would then be coming back for Daboll's 3rd year with that same team, with those same players, with that same understanding. So to me, the Giants probably have that edge just because their coach has proven himself, and you're dealing with men when you're at that level. And he, having won the way he did, going to Minnesota, winning that playoff game, getting that drought over with for them. That's been done in New York. It hasn't been done in Washington. Therefore, I think the Giants probably have the edge from that standpoint.
How restless are the Commander fans right now with this franchise? Should be rewarding the mood.
I mean, a lot of them. It's a new ownership group. So because someone is new, and because it's a different situation, it's exciting. But that won't last if they don't win. That's the fan base that this team has. And you're going to have to do something to fix. This team is 4-8 for a reason. Okay. They are flawed, and they have holes, and they don't have what I consider up to this point a signature victory. The closest thing to it would be the Broncos in Denver. That's because the Broncos are technically the only winning team they've beaten all year. And if you finish 9-8 by running the table, that would mean beating winning teams the rest of the way. That would mean beating a San Francisco team with a winning record. That would mean beating a Dallas team with a winning record. That would mean getting wins against a Dolphins team that's likely to finish with a winning record, which would then say, all right, that's the turning point. But up to this point, other than the Denver game, they don't have that. And the mood around here is not good. I mean, they're giving Harris time because he's new, but a lot of people have seen this before. And they've got to get better quickly, let's put it that way.
So this offseason is going to be real important for the Commanders franchise as well. And this leads to my next question, Adam. What, in your opinion, what are the biggest needs for this Washington Commanders roster going into the 2024 season, in your opinion?
To me, it's real simple. The number one thing you must do is get the best offensive lineman in the 2024 NFL draft. He must be a Washington Commander. Because Sam Howell is on pace to be sacked more than any quarterback in NFL history. The only way to fix that is to get a dominant offensive lineman, at least one. Comparable to when the Colts drafted Quentin Nelson in 2018. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, he's been a Pro Bowler every year. Okay. Mike Shanahan drafted Trent Williams when he came here. Trent's probably on his way. He's going to the Hall of Fame when his career is over. They need the best offensive lineman in the 2024 NFL draft to be a Washington Commander. To me, it's that simple.
That's number one. Okay.
After that, I'd be looking at defensive end because you don't have Chase Young and Montez Sweat anymore. Does something happen with Cam Curl? If not, you can keep him, but you need depth at other positions. But to me, you need to fix that offensive line. You need to get some dominant defensive linemen. You need some of those. And then, if Cam Curl sticks around, that's good. But you need this defense, the secondary, to improve substantially between now and the 2024 season. That's what this team needs.
Well, I'm old school with football. I believe it all starts with your offensive line, your defensive line, and then you add pieces to those. That's how I believe it starts with the O-line and the D-line. If you look at how the Eagles were built, they were built with their offensive line, and then they surrounded Hurts with nice pieces as well to make him successful. Obviously, Hurts wasn't great in his first year, but adding Devontae Smith by the draft, getting A.J. Brown, and then having that running game, and now with DeAndre Swift, it helps the quarterback, and Jalen Hurts doesn't have to feel like he has to make every play on his own.
That's right. And like I said about Sam Howell, I'm worried about how long he's going to last if they don't get elite offensive line help for him. Because to me, you need to make sure, like I said, that makes the offensive line the number one thing you address. in the offseason. You must get an elite offensive lineman who is immediately a Pro Bowl caliber player, because they need that in the absolute worst way.
And do you feel now you have new ownership with Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, and that group that can help him within in free agency as well? Or do you think they should just focus straightly on the draft going into the offseason?
Well, it can help you with free agency just because Josh Harris isn't Dan Snyder. So it's a new regime. You have new staff. You have new people in charge. Therefore, people are willing to give you a chance. But I think, what you first must do is decide the positions that you need first. Those must be addressed. And then the draft is to some degree unknown because you don't have the first pick. This team is not that bad. And unless you have the first pick, you can't pick anyone you want in the draft. What's more, you don't know for sure who's going to be gone when it comes time for your team to select. So that part of it makes it difficult from a free agency standpoint as well. I think, but in free agency, I'd be looking at making sure if you want Cam Curl to return, you're going to have to pay him. But they need at least one top flight offensive lineman. They need another a dominant defensive end who could come in right away and be a big time difference maker. That's what this team needs immediately in 2024.
There's no chance they'll in the offseason go after Sweat or Young, try to bring one of those.
Sweat's already been signed by the Bears.
Signed by Chicago. Okay, so there's no chance you think they would even try to go after Young in the offseason?
I had thought about that, and I would still consider it, but would he come back here? Now, I do not think Young has a long-term future with the 49ers. And I say that only because he's going to cost a fortune.
Absolutely.
He's not going to he's not going to say to San Francisco, I'm going to give you a discount just because we won. He wants to get paid. And the idea that he's going to say, I'm not going to make a business decision. By the way, now maybe the only way I say he does do that is if the 49ers actually win the Super Bowl. If he does that, then yeah, I could see him taking a discount just because of what winning the Super Bowl would do for him from a business standpoint. Short of that, I see Chase Young and somebody else in a different uniform in 2024.
Okay. That leads to my next question. Hey, Adam, are you okay for a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on this 2023 NFL season and some teams in the NFC, the AFC that have kind of surprised you, and maybe a couple teams that have disappointed in your view?
Well, I'll start with this. In the AFC, I think we've seen the Kansas City Chiefs are beatable. Very beatable. And if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you're not by any means intimidated by them, as far as you can win it just as easily as they can. The Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champs. They get the benefit of the doubt. They should be considered the favorite. I get all that. But the Lions beat them. The Broncos have beaten them. And the idea that they can't be beaten again by somebody else, even if you have to go to Arrowhead, is to me out of touch with reality. I think that's a team that's, the AFC. I think Baltimore is a contender. I think, Kansas City is a contender. Let's see how the Bills do the rest of the year. I don't trust Miami with Tua.
Really?
I just think he's an injury waiting to happen. And that really concerns me. Just because he's very fragile. And without him, they don't have a chance. Even with Tyreek Hill, even with Jalen Waddle, I don't think they can hold up then, with a different quarterback. So I like them, but I don't think Tua is somebody you can sit there and say, I know for sure he's going to last the rest of the year without any risk. You follow me?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he's one concussion from being done from the National Football League.
That's a possibility too. As terrible as that is to think about, it's something you have to consider because of the situation that we saw last year against the Bengals. And in the NFC, I think the Eagles are far and away not only the best team in the NFC, but the best team in football. And
really?
I don't think it's even close. I mean, if you thought about last week, they did everything you should do to lose, and they still found a way to win. Okay? They lost. To me, the most important statistic in football is turnover margin. Okay? The Eagles lost the turnover margin to a very talented Buffalo Bills team and still pulled out the win. What's more, the Detroit Lions were very, very fortunate to beat the Chicago Bears after losing the turnover margin as badly as they did.
Oh, yes.
Last time they played Green Bay and they did that, and it bit them. They got bitten. Guess what? They still have games against teams that can hurt them for doing that again. And I don't just trust that they're going to solve that problem and suddenly be at the top of the NFC playing those other teams. So I think the Lions are a playoff team. I think they'll probably get a home playoff game, but I think they have some bad habits that could catch up with them against other teams that will take advantage of that.
Plus the lack of playoff experience as well. Or you think that's overrated?
No, I think you're right on the money, but I also think the last 2 weeks to me have been very concerning because they have some bad habits that I think other teams will take advantage of. And by the way, I think it will probably prevent them from winning the playoff game. So they'll get there, but I don't think they'll make any noise in the postseason because teams will take advantage of their flaws.
And I'm not totally sold on Jared Goff to take you to a championship. In my opinion, I might be wrong.
I like him. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's very good. But I think, and I like Dan Campbell. I think he's done a phenomenal job.
Absolutely.
But there's something about that Lions team that says to me, the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the teams that have elite secondaries, the teams that have elite defenses, will make Detroit pay for their mistakes in ways those other teams didn't. And that's why I don't think they're going to even win a playoff game.
I think their fan base will just be happy winning the division and getting into the playoffs because they've had such a tough time of it over the decades. But I do think the Lions are going in the right direction. I just don't think they're quite an elite team yet in the NFC yet.
I agree with you, but I like Dan Campbell. I think he's done a phenomenal job.
Very good coach. He fits that city perfectly.
Right.
This is blue collared, no nonsense mentality.
You're absolutely right.
And that leads to my next question. I wanted to ask you this. And also, I think Cincinnati's been a bit of a disappointment. I know Joe Burrow's out for the year, but I really thought they were going to be a contender in the AFC, and they're 5-6, and now they're going to have to pretty well win out to try to get into a wild card spot in that AFC.
Well, they're done. I don't think they're getting into the playoffs at all. I think Joe Burrow is outstanding. And I think he's a future Hall of Famer. I think he's phenomenal. But when he went down with that injury in his season ended, the Bengals did too, as a team. And I don't see any way they get into the playoffs. I don't see any way they make any kind of noise the rest of the season, just because he's that important to that team. Zach Taylor's done a great job. He's a good coach. They'll keep him. They should keep him. That's the smart thing to do. They still have Joe Burrow. He's doing a great job, turning that city into a football town in a way that we haven't seen since Boomer Esiason. But this is not their year.
It just shows you, Adam, how it doesn't matter if you're a Patriots fan or not, but it just shows you how great that 20-year run was. And I don't know if we're ever going to see that again in this National Football League, a team having that much success over 2 decades.
We'll see it again, but I was never a believer in Bill Belichick as the best coach in football. I was never a believer in any of that stuff. I saw too much of his I saw his entire tenure with the Browns, where they had 4 losing seasons in 5 years. I saw what happened in New England. They were 5-11 the year before he got. I know that's the first year, but they had a losing record when Brady took over. You know, I knew that he lucked into his quarterback. A lot of people luck into their quarterback, and I get that. But the idea he was ever in the class of a Parcells, of a Gibbs, of even, I would even say Tony Dungy, because Dungy didn't have Hall of Fame quarterbacks with the Bucs, yet he still won there. You know, he still left there with winning record. I don't think Belichick's even among the best coaches in the league. I don't think the idea that he was ever the best coach in football, that was completely out of touch with reality. If it wasn't out of touch with reality, they'd be winning now. They're not.
I'm going to put you on the spot again here. If he does leave New England, whether he's fired or he resigns, is there any chance that he could even come to the Washington Commanders?
I've heard that, but I would not bring him in for 2 reasons. One, he's 71 years old. Okay. You need somebody that's younger by a lot. And another thing, if you're a player on this team, why do you believe in him? They haven't won unless Brady's been there. What makes you think that's going to change him coming in? If you're a player on this team and you're going to be here next year, and there will be certain guys here, regardless of whether or not Rivera is fired, there will be holdovers from his era. If you're one of those players, why would you believe in him given his record since Brady left? I wouldn't. And so I don't think, and some people are saying that if Harris does that, it's no different than if Snyder were here, bringing that big name in, doing that
That's not the answer.
The free agency thing with Dion and Bruce Smith, where he signed all those free agents and it didn't work. Now that team didn't have a kicker that otherwise would have made the playoffs. It cost North Turner his job. But the point is that you're still talking about swinging for a home run in both cases, and big names in both cases. And so, to me, that's not the way to go.
Look at the Eagles a couple years ago. They hired a little known assistant coach with the Colts, Nick Sirianni, and the Eagles and Jeffrey Lurie took a lot of heat saying, Nick Sirianni, who's this and that? And look at the job he's done in Philadelphia. And that's a hard city and fan base to win in, too.
It is. They were hard on Donovan McNabb when he didn't deliver.
Oh, yes. Or Andy Reid. Andy Reid, too.
But they forget, they were hard on McNabb when he was drafted instead of Ricky Williams.
That's true. They booed him right out of the draft.
And McNabb had the last laugh because the Eagles were the perennial winners of the NFC East year after year after year. Now, I've heard the criticism of Donovan McNabb, but up until Doug Peterson became that team's coach, they weren't winning after him either. So,
well, the Chad Kelly era was a mistake on Jeffrey Lurie's part.
But even when Andy Reid was there, they had Michael Vick. They weren't winning. Even when they had other guys, they weren't winning. And so, Chip Kelly comes in and he's figured out after 2 seasons. Only after Doug Peterson won that Super Bowl did anybody in Philadelphia start talking. Now, Carson Wentz, when he tore his ACL, before he tore his ACL, he was a more athletic version of Ben Roethlisberger. He was that good.
Yes.
But after his ACL tear, he was never the same, and he still isn't. I have a firm belief even now, if he hadn't done that, he'd still be the Eagles quarterback to this day.
And there would be no Jalen Hurt era.
That's right.
Philly. So,
but that's not necessarily bad because you're talking about him winning the Super Bowl instead of Nick Foles. But it shows you how quickly things can change. And the Eagles were okay because they lucked into Jalen Hurts being available. But, I still think Donovan McNabb, in his own way, had the last laugh. Because when they were 4-12 in 2012, he said, now you see it isn't that easy. Well, he was right. It isn't. But I still think, Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts, he's been phenomenal. They've done a great job. Andy Reid's going to be in the Hall of Fame 5 years after he retires. But, I think, the Eagles have been an elite team for a while. And Jeffrey Lurie has found ways to win. But, we'll see. If they win it this year, then that says a lot more about Lurie than it does anybody else, because he's the guy who brought all those other ones in.
That's true. And I want to give credit to Doug Peterson, and look at the job he's done in Jacksonville and helped develop Trevor Lawrence as well. Well,
that's also a credit to Andy Reid. Why? Because because Peterson is an Andy Reid disciple. And so Absolutely. when they fired Andy Reid after the 2012 season and they went with Chip Kelly, to some degree, Jeffrey Lurie was admitting he made a mistake by going back to Doug Peterson as an Andy Reid disciple.
I don't
necessarily need Andy Reid, but what he brought and his coaching tree is something we need again. So that's why he went back. I was surprised he fired Peterson after winning the Super Bowl. That to me was a shocker. Even though Sirianni's done well, remember what he did. He fired a Super Bowl winning coach who won the only Super Bowl the Eagles have ever won. That to me was a stunner.
Yes, and that just shows you, I guess, that fan base, they want to win. They won't put up with losing. And I was shocked too, because I thought Doug Peterson is still a very good head coach, but things happen for a reason. But yeah, Philadelphia is not an easy place to coach, by the way.
No, it isn't.
Definitely. We're going to wrap this up, Adam, and I appreciate you coming on again today. Just quick thoughts on how you see the Eagles-Niners game, how the Eagles-Niners game is going to match up, and maybe a little bit about Miami and Washington on Sunday.
I'll start first with your background, your team, the Eagles. I have the Eagles winning by at least a touchdown. And they could win that game by a lot if there's an injury to, anyone on that offensive line, or Brock Purdy makes a lot of mistakes. The Eagles are the best team in football because they make you pay for what you do wrong. And they did that to Purdy last year. This will be no different if he doesn't play well. If the Commanders play well, it'll be a close game. If not, they will lose to the Dolphins by 4 touchdowns. Because the Miami Dolphins have tremendous speed, and they can make you pay if you miss tackles.
Do you feel that they are the quickest team in the National Football League?
Because Kansas City doesn't have Tyreek Hill anymore, and the Dolphins do, they probably have the fastest group of wide receivers in the NFL, which means they have tremendous speed, and they'll make you pay if you don't cover them and aren't disciplined.
Well, it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to that Philly-San Francisco game at 4:25, and Miami and Washington, I believe, is a 1:00 kickoff at FedEx Field as well on Sunday.
Right.
Okay. And finally, Adam, can you just tell my Canadian audience and my audience internationally a little bit about the Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus show, and where is it available online, and how often does a new episode come out about the Washington Commanders?
Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus is a local show in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. It airs on Masson, but it also has a YouTube channel. It's called Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus television show, and it airs on local TV. It has a YouTube channel, and it's called Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus TV show. If you look it up on YouTube, it is there. It is available, and it does give you an ability to watch an episode each week, or go back and watch old episodes from the past. I've been doing it since 2010. I've continued to do it to this day. I'll do it as long as they'll keep me around. But I love my time there. I love working there, and it's really a fantastic program. I love it.
I have the link to the YouTube channel on the bottom of my tickers. And just quick thoughts on Tony McGee and Donna Hopkins, who I've had on my show as well.
Donna and Tony is fantastic. Tony has been doing his show since 1985. Tony played many seasons in the NFL. He played from 71 to 73 for the Chicago Bears. So he was teammates with Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers. He also played for the New England Patriots from 1974 to 81. And he played with Stanley Morgan and Julius Adams. But he also played for the then Washington Redskins before they changed the name to football team, where he won a Super Bowl with them during the 82-83 season. He played there from 82 to 84. So he has a career that spans more than it spans 14 years. And he played with a lot of great players. He has a following that goes back to the 70s. He's had many guests on his show. He's had James Brown from CBS. He's had Chris Berman from ESPN. He's had him on there. So
Mike Quick from the Eagles.
He's been on there too. He's had many teams from the Washington football team, legends there. Darrell Green, Art Monk. So you can look at his show. You can watch it. He has episodes from the past. He has episodes every week, and his show is fantastic.
All right, and we're going to wrap this up, Adam. I have to get you a prediction for tonight. Thursday night football, we have Seattle at Dallas at 8:15 tonight. How do you see this game playing out?
The Cowboys are at home.
They're a tough team at home.
On paper, they're the better team. They are smart enough to know that they are playing for positioning come playoff time, seeding. And at least on paper, they have the better quarterback. Dak is better than Geno Smith. And for that reason, on their home field, I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win.
I hate to say this as an Eagles fan, but I have Dallas winning this game 31-14.
Yeah, I have them winning by at least a touchdown.
Okay. And I hope it's a competitive game because I'll be honest, the Thursday night games this year haven't been that great. I'm traditionalist. I wish they'd go back to Sunday nights and Monday night games.
Yeah, I agree with you. I still watch old Monday night games on YouTube.
So do I.
The Monday Night Football on ABC with Al Michaels, Frank Gifford, and Dan Dierdorf. There's nothing quite like it. And even now, it is just to be able to have watched that growing up was a real treat that I still miss. I mean, I'll watch reruns of those games that they called because of how good they were.
Or I'm watching old games of John Madden and Pat Summerall and watching games from the 70s. Yes.
And so absolutely. That Monday Night Football, I started in 1989 watching Monday Night Football every Monday night. I began doing it then. I have never looked back. So I'll do it the rest of my life.
And I missed the Sunday night old crew of Mike Patrick, Joe Theismann, and Paul McGuire. I really enjoyed those guys.
They were good too. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, I remember before Paul McGuire when it was just Mike Patrick and Joe Theismann in the early 90s. When Paul McGuire I remember when he used to call games with Don Criqui.
Yes.
I remember when he called games with Marv Albert. I remember when he called games with Dick Enberg and Phil Simms.
Dick Enberg is still one of my favorite, the late Dick Enberg.
Absolutely.
He had that big game voice, even if it was just a regular season game. He just had that voice.
Oh, he did. And he called many great games. He called Super Bowls. He called NBA games. He called playoff games in the NBA. He called tennis. He did a little bit of everything. Dick Enberg is a legend whose name will last forever.
Absolutely. And finally, Adam, where can my audience follow you on social media if they want to ask you a question about the Washington
Sure.
Commanders or the National
Yes.
Football League?
My name, I'm at Adam Battocchi. That's my screen. That's my name on Twitter. And if anybody has any questions for me, they feel free to message me. I'm available on there. I'll answer you if you message me, and that's what I go by.
All right. Well, Adam, I want to say thank you for giving me well over an hour of your time today. I really
You're
enjoyed
very welcome.
speaking with you on here.
Likewise,
And you have
Chris.
And hey, I'm still a work in progress as I'm working on a full-time career in the radio industry. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And what I love about my show is the storytelling aspect, and learning something from my guests all the time. And I did that again today with yourself.
Thank you very much, Chris. This was fantastic.
Thank you. And give me a little bit of time, and I will send you a copy of the video copy and the audio copy of this show as well. And it will air on WQEE 99.1 FM, most likely Thursday night or Friday night, because my show is on remote from my home here in Guelph.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Have a great afternoon.
You do the same.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed season 7. Episode 10 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet here in Guelph. Before we wrap up our show today, I'm going to play a clip of an interview I did at the Hamilton Convention Center 2 weeks ago for Grey Cup weekend. And I'm just going to put this clip on here right now. And this is an interview with wide receiver number 89, Kenny Lawlers of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, courtesy of my YouTube channel. Everybody, Chris Palme here from WQEE 99.1 FM in Georgia, and I'm here at the Hamilton Convention Center this morning, and I have a special guest with me from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, number 89, Kenny Lawlers. Kenny, thoughts on the victory over the BC Lions on Saturday night?
Oh man, my thoughts was it was a hard fought game, man, all the way to the end. BC came out and played a pretty good game. I feel like we were just the more physical team, cleaner team as well. And we made more plays at the end of the day. So my final thoughts is it was a hard-fought game. We made more plays, and now we're here in the Grey Cup.
Overall, what you thought of the Bombers season this year? Obviously 14-4 in the regular season, 1-0 playoffs. What's different, a little bit different from this team than they were last year?
For me, I wasn't here last year. I was in Edmonton, so I could give you more so of an outsider's perspective. What I'll just say is, the team seems more hungrier, as if they suffered defeat in the Grey Cup, and that kind of hurt them. So coming back, when I got into training camp, it was just that was our goal. That was what we was working for. It was kind of like the new flame has been relit under us. So that's what I took from that.
What are your thoughts on playing in Winnipeg and Manitoba for the Blue Bombers, a franchise with great tradition?
Man, this is an unbelievable franchise organization, and man, I just honor it every day. I'm thankful. I'm grateful to be able to play for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, to be able to honor the community as well. And man, I just thank God every day that I'm able to continue my dream as a professional football player, play for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, such a great organization, and be here at my third Grey Cup.
And finally, thoughts on your Grey Cup opponents, the Montreal Alouettes?
They're a hot team right now, obviously, and they have a pretty good defense, man. My hat goes down to the defense. They pursue to the ball, they cover well, and they hit physical. So it's gonna be a great match, man. I know we're gonna get their best. It's obviously it's the last game of the season, the highest stage. So we wouldn't expect anything less. So it's gonna. I feel like it's gonna be a hard physical game to come ahead, which is going to be very exciting.
And finally, what's a fun fact about Kenny Lawler the fans might not know? And just quick thoughts on head coach Mike O'Shea.
Quick fun fact about me is I'm passionate in youth development. I love giving back into the community. I love giving back into helping youth achieve their dreams. O'Shea, and there's so much things I could say about O'Shea, but he's just a great man all around. And, I know that is very broad, but when you see a great man, you know one. And when it comes to family and football, he embodies all of that. And, man, he's a hell of a head coach and a father figure as well. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for doing this, and good luck Sunday against the Montreal Alouettes at the Grey Cup in Hamilton Sunday night at 6:00.
Oh, man, thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that was Kenny Lawler from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who played in the Grey Cup this year against Hamilton. Winnipeg lost, unfortunately, 28-24 to Montreal. But I want to say thank you to Kenny Lawler from the Bombers for coming on doing an interview with me at the Hamilton Convention Center, and thanks to the CFL for setting me up with a media pass as well. I hope everyone enjoyed my show today with Adam Battocchi from Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus show, covering the National Football League's Washington Commanders and talking a little bit about them and also the NFL as well. Thursday night football, Seattle, Dallas at 8:15 tonight. Adam picked Dallas to win it, and I also picked them to win too. I have the Cowboys winning this game 31-14 as well. Also, I wanted to let you guys all know my next live is CDP Sports Talk by Barry Cullen Chevrolet here in Guelph, Tuesday, December 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern, with my special guest, Brianna Wright. She is a personal brand stylist. She's certified, and you can check out her website at styledbybrianna.com. She helps young people or people looking to get into careers, how to dress properly, how wear the proper wardrobe. So looking forward to that show this Tuesday, December 5th, again at 3 p.m. Eastern, with Brianna right here on Live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet, and weeknights at 8 o'clock on WQEE 99.1 FM in Metro Atlanta. As always, Live with CDP Sports Talk is a weekly sports and entertainment talk show hosted by yours truly, Chris Pame. Is always on weeknights at 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern on WQEE 99.1 FM, The Key, the home of Southern sports and talk, the heartbeat of Atlanta. Our radio station's website is wqeefm.radio12345.com. Live with CDP Sports Talk is live streamed on these platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter /X, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And thank you to everyone watching this show today on live stream as well. You can also follow my digital media work and my previous radio and podcast shows on my website, beacons.ai/Chris D. Pame. Live with CDP Sports Talk, again, is sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership here in Guelph at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210, or email them at info@barrycullen.com. And speaking of Barry Cullen Chevrolet, gear up for fall at Barry Cullen Chevrolet with a 2023 Trailblazer, like I do. I have the RS model sold to me by Nathan Laud at Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Does a great job there. A 2023 Trailblazer, 5.49% financing for up to 48 months. More details available at barrycullen.com. And book a test drive today at Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Give them a call at 519-824-0210, or pop by the dealership again in the Guelph Auto Mall. I'm also on TikTok, by the way. I'm a TikTok content creator. Check me out there at Live with CDP. A lot of my player, coaches interviews, and all my media work and podcast and radio show promos are on TikTok. Again, check me out Live with CDP and hit the follow notification there as well. StreamYard is the official live stream provider of Live with CDP Sports Talk. If you're into webinars or podcasting such as yours truly, check out StreamYard.com. Live with CDP Sports Talk, the audio version is available on these platforms: iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify for Podcasters, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox, LinkedIn, Pandora, and Tuned In. And again, weeknights at 8 on WQEE 99.1 FM. And that's about it, guys. Got some NFL news going on today. The Arizona Cardinals released tight end Zach Ertz, and there's some news from the Buffalo Bills. There's this is just alleged reports with Von Miller and an incident with his pregnant girlfriend in Dallas, Texas. There is, I guess, an arrest warrant for Von Miller, and this is just alleged reports that came from ESPN as well. So we'll have to see what happens in that case. And as for Zach Ertz, the Eagles released a former Eagles tight end. I personally, in my personal opinion, if he's still healthy and the Eagles have room for him, I would like to see the Eagles bring Zach Ertz back, finish his career with the Eagles this year. But we'll see what happens with that as well. And that's about it. I want to say thank you again to my guest, Adam Battocchi, from Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus, a weekly show covering the Washington Commanders, for coming on today and talking about Washington football and about the National Football League as well. And again, the Eagles take on the 49ers this Sunday, 4:25 kickoff from Lincoln Financial Field, and really looking forward to that game. And then Saturday night, 8 p.m. from Lucas Oil Field in Indianapolis, Indiana, on Fox. It's going to be the Big Ten championship between the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are 10-2, going against the Michigan Wolverines, who are 12-0, and Jim Harbaugh will be behind the coach will be behind the bench for the Michigan Wolverines for that game as well, after their big win against Ohio State last Saturday, 30-24. What a job by Shamal Moore, who did a great job filling in for Jim Harbaugh. Sharon is the offense coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines. Again, I want to say thank you to my guest, Adam Battocchi, for coming on today. I hope I didn't pronounce his name wrong. I want to say thank you so much to Adam for coming on Live with CDP Sports Talk. And just give me a little bit of time this afternoon. I'll have this episode downloaded to audio and video and sent to WQEE 99.1 FM. I hope everybody has a great evening. Enjoy the Thursday night football game between Seattle and Dallas, and enjoy the football games this weekend with college football and the National Football League as well. Again, thank you to Adam, my guest, for coming on today. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon, great weekend, and we'll see you here on Tuesday, December 5th at 3 p.m. with my guest, Brianne Wright, as well. All right. Thanks for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet here and on WQEE 99.1 FM. Thanks a lot, and have a great afternoon, everyone.